On Monday night here on New Mexico PBS, we'll begin a two-night presentation of a documentary called Kind-Hearted Woman. It follows Robin Poorbear, who lives in North Dakota's Spirit Lake Reservation, as she fights against domestic abuse. It's an issue that impacts every community, native or otherwise certainly, but here in New Mexico, Native communities are taking notice. Tara Gatewood, host of Native America Calling, is doing some work with us this week as she gathers together three people fighting the problem.
With us today from the Pueblo of Laguna, Governor Richard Luarqui, and we also have Christian Redbird, a student at CNM who has dealt firsthand with family violence, and Patrick Trujillo, a consultant and the director of the Native American Training Institute. Thanks for joining us today. And Christian, we want to know, how has domestic violence impacted your life? What did you see growing up?
Well, I come from a family of alcoholism, and with that comes with many other factors, and domestic violence was really a big part of that. With my family, and well, mainly with my parents, they would fight a lot during the weekend. So being in the week and going to school was the best part for me. Like, the best part of my day was just to go to school and just live in a classroom, be with friends and teachers, and being like a healthier environment. But on the weekends, it was just so hard to live with, and just kind of living in fear, until finally when I was 12 and my mom decided to change everything, and we moved to Oklahoma.
In your current position, you're really thinking about your life growing up as you help other young women in the community. And we're going to learn more about that as we continue with our conversation. And Patrick, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to domestic violence impacting a family, how does it affect young people? What have you learned, or what have you heard from your community?
I think when it affects in so many ways, when it comes to domestic violence, many of the youth are, get into trouble themselves. And then, like working with the, working with the youth that are either institutionalized because they have that issue of the alcoholism within the family, or substances, drugs, whatever it may be, usually stems from that. So it's like they have to move out of their home, and then they get placed in foster care, group homes, and then they end up in institutions. There's quite a few Native Americans, Native American youth in those kind of settings right now. So it's like having to geographically move from their tribes to get them out to get some kind of treatment, or getting in trouble just from that. And it's heartbreaking when you have to see that when they themselves are trying to come back to the community is another issue.
And is it ever hard to get that point across that it is a family issue?
In most cases, yes, it is. Because people, when you have alcoholism and domestic violence, people don't want to look at the truth of what's really there. It's more like having to say, well, there's some behavior issues. There's some denial going on. So they don't want to look at, families don't want to look at themselves as being bad, as being something that's, something that they look at themselves already in a negative way. And I think they look at that from the community's point of view, is who's looking at us in those ways. So we have to kind of protect the family. So I can understand the protecting of the family, but not to be exposed out there.
Mm-hmm. And Governor Luarqui, when we do think of our communities and as a tribal leader, how important is this issue? And when you look at it from a governor's viewpoint, what is being done about this, even in your own community?
Well, first of all, Terry, thank you for inviting the Pueblo of Laguna to be present in this conversation. It's an honor to be at the table along with you and Christian and Pat. I'm honored that you've invited us. On an individual level, I grew up in a home where I was blessed. I didn't see that. I didn't know what that was, domestic violence. Although I heard about it, I never experienced it firsthand. Now, on this other end of the spectrum, in a tribal leadership role, the first time I saw the reality of it was in a presentation, and they showed us the statistics of what was happening at Laguna. But even more impacting were pictures, and that tore me apart, because I grew up in an environment, I think most of us do, in the Native world, that we're taught that the female is precious, that our mother, the creator, all those things we get life from, we get health, we get happiness, we get laughter. And then you see them get hit. I couldn't connect it. So, but it stands to reason maybe why we're having the issues we are in society today, because that core is getting impacted. Now, where we're at as a Pueblo is trying to affect those things by developing policy, developing a form of governance that protects our community, but also supporting things like the recent passage of the Violence Against Women Act. Those are things that are very critical to making sure that tribal communities engage in, so that we are able to better protect our community members, women, children. Violence shouldn't be a part of our process. That's not our native way. So it's those kind of things that we need to be, as tribal leadership, be mindful of.
And Patrick, what more can be done on the tribal government level to keep our communities safe?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Governor Luarqui for his comments, because I think that right now it's like having to get tribal leadership involved. And I think that was an issue before, is where is tribal leadership? What is their role within the community when it comes to any type of violence or anything having to do with our communities that's going to make it safe and secure? And I agree with you that, Governor Luarqui, I agree with you that, it's not always violence the perpetrator always being the male. Sometimes it's the female as well. And I think that we kind of leave that out, because there are males that are out there too that have been abused by women. And I think it's also kind of like having to look at men as being the perpetrators all the time. But I think that there are also having to look at, there are women that do this as well. But when it comes into the community, it's having to say, how do we make it so safe for our own people? And that's the reason why when I look at wellness is all the way around, from families to your community, because as a Native American, we're taught in our pueblos that it's the community's responsibility to raise a child. And so where is that at nowadays? Where is that at? Because I don't see that as much anymore. I can go back and the elders back then, and just to share with you, as myself, as a traditional practitioner in my community, and having to look at the spirituality of where I look at for myself, is having to see, well, how can we work together even with those that carry those kind of roles?
Sure. And working together is, extremely
Exactly.
important. And Christian, I want to direct this back to you. You hear two gentlemen across from the table who understand the community's role, also the government's role in protecting people from domestic violence or helping people who are dealing with it. And so in your story, were there people that you wish who had said some of the words that you heard here today, or understood the importance other people need to play in an issue of domestic violence?
Yeah, I really wish growing up that there were people there that I knew I could go to. It's very, very hard going to school and knowing that you wish you could say something, but you can't because you'll get somebody in trouble, which it's a bad thing that it's happening, but when it comes to alcoholism, when my dad would drink, he probably wouldn't really remember what happened, and it falls under his addiction. When he was sober, he would never, ever, ever touch my mom, like in a very wrong way, like he wouldn't do that to her. So it's kind of hard trying to find the balances to where you could speak to somebody, but not get them into trouble or break your family apart, make things, make them worse than what they already are. So for me, that was my biggest thing to go to, is because I wanted to talk to teachers, I wanted to talk to counselors, I wanted to say things, but I had to be very careful in the things I had to say. I at least had to say like how I was feeling and how like I wanted to go about things, or how, yeah, just how I felt, but I couldn't say the real things that were happening. So.
And what are some words you wish that adults outside of your family, or maybe even extended family, had said to you that you knew this type of door was open?
I would just wish that, well, in my opinion, like the treatment world, like the way treatment goes with an addiction, it's not that great in the first place, because it's very hard to get treatment. It's very hard. So I just wish at least somebody was able to reach out to my parents and say, look, these are the things that are happening. Here is a place you can go to. Maybe, you know, you can find a way to afford it, maybe, or at least just have the option there for them. They weren't, at least when I was growing up, they weren't presented with these things. You know, my mom went to work, she went home. My dad did the same thing. It's not like they were able to go to college, so they don't know, or I felt like they didn't know how to do the outreach that they needed in order to keep our family together. So I just really wish that at least maybe some of my cousins, maybe some of my aunts and uncles would have been like, you know, here's something that I ran into. You know, me being as a kid, I always felt like I could find all the answers, or that I could, you know, try my best in helping them. But I was only, you know, 12 years old or younger, so it was just very hard for me to keep that in my head, that I can't do everything. So.
And Patrick, what are some other ways that young people who are witnessing this, so that they don't feel like there is no one to talk to? What more can be done?
Well, I think that with young people like that, to look around in your communities. I think we all know one another in our communities, and part of that, just listening to you as being a young individual, is that you get to a certain age when there's domestic violence going on, you don't want to talk about it, because it is that safety again. Who can we go to? And the other thing is, can I trust myself to be able to say what I need to say? Expression is very difficult for many people. Even when I look at it with young people, that if there was, people that work with young people, a safe place for them to go to. And that was one of the things that for myself, when I worked as a substance abuse counselor, one of the issues that was there was already a part of gambling. People go to bingo, parents would leave the kids alone. So what I did is open up a recreation facility for them, where you put in, whatever you can to keep them there at a certain time, just to keep them safe, and they run it themselves. That was one of my ways of having to say, well, this is a solution. It may not be a complete answer for it, but I had the opportunity to gain that trust from them, so that when something was going on, they were able to share that with me. And so you had a realm of people that could, you can address these issues to. And if we had those things, again, as strong as it could be. And that's why part of my wellness was having to say, well, I've got to be strong enough. I got to make myself having to look at where my wellness is, so that when it comes to that, I know what it is that I need to talk about. I know what it is that I need to hear. I need to listen. Most times it's more about listening to individuals such as yourself. We may not have all the answers, but I can say that the young people, you have solutions. And so the solutions come from the young people. So then listening to them, you can go with whatever you can build around that to make it a safe environment for you, for the young people that are out there. The other thing is that I see is that today, the other thing that has come up is fatherhood. Fatherhood is about bringing fathers together, and the roles of both the mother and the father, the grandparents. I think those ones really need to be clarified. And we need to find our place in our community, in our families, as a means of having to look at intervention or prevention. Because now, like, I am listening to more men starting to express. As Native men, that was very difficult, even for myself, to express anything, out in the open, because of that safety realm again. And the other thing is, there was also the shame with a male. And as it was expressed, women are the people that created tradition. We didn't as men. As men, we learned to nurture it and take care of it.
And Governor Lewarke, are tribal governments getting better at listening?
I think they are, and a big piece of, I think, a validator of that is, again, the engagement from the policy side. But I think what's also real important is now that there's a lot of attention also being given to the historical element, that this didn't start just yesterday or last year, or this is something that's been around for probably since the 1700s, when we saw the imposition and how people were treated. When the Spanish and Mexican came to this area, the Inquisition period. So when our people were put into slavery and all those kind of things happened. Sometimes we don't acknowledge those pieces, but it happened. When you look at federal policy, the genocide, termination, assimilation period, the boarding schools, those are all influencers to this type of behavior. So I think those are elements that have impacted how government is now looking at policy. So those have been very helpful, but I think the other piece of it is that it's also causing government to re-look at that situation, similar to what Christian said about at 12 years old, she realized she can't do everything. Neither can a government.
And Governor, a little bit on what Patrick was saying, how do we get it to the point where more men are involved, or as Patrick said, it doesn't feel odd to be a male speaking up on this topic?
Well, I think, that's one of those discussions that come back to community, and community being responsible to what he said of our roles. Right now, you're seeing in some cases where we're in each other's areas, if you will. The men are coming over here to the women are coming over here to the men, and we're blurring that line. We have distinct responsibilities. And I think when we can reframe those things, it brings strength and it brings courage to be able to have those conversations. But it also reinforces the importance of community involvement. Again, that's what he mentioned. That old term of it takes a village to raise a kid, to raise a child. I remember growing up where if I got in trouble somewhere in the village, whoever caught me, it didn't matter who caught me. They would spank me, get after me, take me home, and I got another spanking, So, but they also explained to you why they got after you. And they nurtured you. They didn't, maybe you got a cookie and some Kool-Aid afterward. But now we close the curtain when we see somebody doing something wrong. We're not helping that process. So I think that's the other piece that comes back into play, and which is going to help the males become more responsible to what it is we're to do, and equally with the women. Because the other piece, this is where I see maybe Western influence. We hear that a lot in our Native communities. The outside is influencing the way we, and one of the example I would give on that is rights. Well, I have a right to do this. I have a right to free speech. I have a right to whatever. But in our Native communities, we're taught you have responsibility. That earns you rights. But we're doing it the other way now.
So it is definitely putting an added pressure of connecting to who we are as Native Americans in quote, a modern day. Right. And so when we start addressing the issue of domestic violence, what else are we helping in our communities? The two of you speak of tribal communities, and Christian, you're living in an urban setting. And so when you hear that question, when we start to address domestic violence, what does that make you think of what else we are working with?
With that, I think we're working a lot with substance using. That does, for at least for me, the way I see it, and for my own life, that does play a big part into it. think coming to a big understanding of what addiction is and how it's going, at least through my parents and the way my parents have been living, and it's been really hard. It's been just something very hard to live with, and just finding the treatment that's available for them. At least, through my school, I've been provided meetings, I guess, Al-Anon, I think that's what it's called, to go to and talk about like how people cope with certain things and how they're dealing with it, or how they're trying to go through treatment and deal with, get over their addiction. And I think that's one big thing that our communities really need, especially being a young person, being a young woman, being in college. It's everywhere. You can look on TV, you can see what your friends are doing the weekend. It's just, addiction eases its way into your life. You think you're having fun, you're thinking you're doing all these things, but in the end, if you're 6 years later, if you can't quit that, then that means you're starting to realize your problem. And when you're in a different mindset, that just changes everything. You know what I mean? And especially with my family, it was just so hard to realize that. I'm like, this is my family, this is how we are, this is what we do. But I caught myself following their footsteps,
So all the more reason why conversations like this become very important. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here today, and want to thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's a very important conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.